Hi, everybody. So I think I told you a previous talk that they chose speakers differently this time, and they basically just said, you, come talking. And they were looking for a talk along the lines of putting together Windows management tools. And so basically, I'm going to do something that's different from what I normally do. Here was my theory. And again, this is the first time I'm doing this. I hope this doesn't suck. Thank you all for being here. Seriously. It's the morning after the party. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay? When you get a new version of Windows, it's got 55 new knobs and some doodads, and there's little sprinkles that go on top of the left-hand side of it. And many times you're sort of like, okay, I heard somebody say in the keynote that you could fix some problem. But they didn't tell you that there's 57 steps to do it. This is all I'm going to do today. This is all I'm going to do today, is I am basically just going to say, here, an awful lot of options, hard to keep it straight. I'm going to outline some combinations. What I intend to do is to say, you want to solve this problem? Here's 4 options, and here's the rough steps. This is what they do. This is the ingredients you'll need. That's important. There's an awful lot of the cool new things in Windows 10 that only work if you log on with your Azure AD account. You know, the one that you all have? How many of you have an Azure AD account? Wow, that's more than I thought. But still, a fairly small minority of the group. Okay? So I want you to know that stuff. Okay? So we'll talk about what it does, what it costs, and what are the ingredients. So that's kind of going to be my plan. Okay so far? How many of you were at my talk on Tuesday morning? Okay, many of you did evaluations. You were very kind, and I appreciate that. 2 of you said wasn't technical enough. This is a 200-level talk. That means it's not supposed to be technical, okay? So, one of you said, two of you said, he needs to do demos. Okay, the reason I didn't do demos was A, I was crushed for time, and B, Windows 10 still doesn't work. It's getting there. It's just, I think I said this Tuesday morning, but it's honest to God, I will do the same thing 8 times and get different results. So I'm going to hang it out there because it's the last talk. What could possibly go wrong? And we'll see how the demos work, okay? But you may see a lovely white box with attractive blue text that says, something went wrong. And that's just all it says. Something went wrong. I'd go for a blue screen any day, but, you know, so. So having said that, with the weaseling out of the way, let's do the talk, all right? So is that what you guys wanted? Yeah. All right, good. Here's what I got so far. Identity solutions, I want to talk about those because there's a number of them. Because as has been the case ever since Windows 8 comes around, well, those MSAs come into play. It's kind of silly that we're logging on to our laptops at our big companies with our Hotmail accounts, but we're doing that. And the Azure AD, etc. I'm going to tell you about Windows Store app control. That's one of the big stories. I will have a number of scenarios on that because they have completely changed the window. So let's admit a few things. How many of you couldn't give a hoot about Metro apps? Yeah, okay. So, right. You're rolling out Windows 10 despite Metro, right? Yeah, okay. I still feel duty-bound to tell you about it because, here's why. The store is changing. Microsoft wants the store to be a unified store, and what does that mean? Rolling out desktop apps. Now, I talked to you about the packager when you were with me on Tuesday morning. What does that mean? Microsoft is trying to present us administrators with a world where we pretty much can choose to get our apps from the store. Now, how many of you live in a place where you got System Center, you got Run and Config Manager? Okay, for you guys, you've been doing this for a long time. You've got the package thing, you got the company store, you got all kinds of cool things you can do. Config Manager is not cheap or easy, though. And so for the rest of us, Microsoft's moving in a direction of even an idiot like me, in about 15 minutes, could set up a specialized company store. And the desktop apps are not coming out now, but they're coming soon. Remember, there's going to be 3 new versions of Windows a year. And by the way, I'm told that the version that's coming out in July will be incomplete. All the features won't work yet. I talked to someone at Windows. I can't tell you that person's name. And I said, you're shipping in July, but it's not complete? Golly, not the actual word used. And I said, why are you doing this? And he said, well, we want to get it out there for people. I said, darn well nobody actually deploys a version of Windows until it's been out for a year anyway. I guess they want to get the year started early or something like that. But there'll be another build in November-ish, October-ish, that will have all the features. I said, really, you're going to ship it without all the features? I said, because that worked so well with Hyper-V in 2008? Is it okay? No server people in the room? That was funny. So, when we talk about keeping corporate data on personal devices, I actually didn't finish those slides, so I will tell you about them and whatever else I have time for, okay? So first of all, there's two options you got to always remember. Option one is don't do anything. Microsoft is supporting Windows 7 until the end of this decade. Windows 8 until 2023. That sounds like a science fiction date, What is it? One of the guys at NASA said a couple of weeks ago that he expected that in 15 years we would have evidence of life on other planets. So we might have evidence of life on other planets before we have Windows 10. Okay. There is one little hook. Now, what's the good thing about Windows 10? The good thing about Windows 10 is that if you're thinking of leaving Windows 7, this is the bizarre thing. I've said this in other talks. Forgive me if I'm saying it to you and you've already heard it. Is that actually moving people from Windows 7 to Windows 10 is easier than moving them from Windows 7 to Windows 8. Because Windows 8 has this weird Martian interface, where 8 and 8.1 have this weird Martian interface. If you stop and think about it, imagine that you've got this really smart 15-year-old. Let's make him a guy. And he's been running Windows all his life. And you hand him an iPad for the first time. How long is it going to take him to figure out the iPad? 12 minutes? In 20, he'll have the porn, so. Hey, don't laugh. We wouldn't have the internet without porn. It's the main driver for the big files in the old days. Anyway, in contrast, let's take another 15-year-old. Really smart young lady, and she's been running Apple stuff her whole life. You give her a Windows Surface tablet. And she's like, okay, wait a minute, wait. So there's two desktops? And one desktop I can use my finger, right? And the other desktop where I got to get a mouse or a pointer because everything's really small? Huh? Is this like a joke? She's telling me there's like two desktops. There's the one where I can use my finger, and there's the one where I want to give you the finger, So, and some apps live in one desktop, and other apps live in the other desktop, which is just wrong. The notion in America of separate but equal desktops was struck down by the Supreme Court in Plessy versus Ferguson. It's led to what has to be called apartheid. Come on. Windows 10, my friends, sets those apps free. The desktop is unified. It's all one desktop. Hallelujah. Sing it, brother. Testify. I have warned you there's no content in this presentation, right? Just checking. The funny hook, though, is that the upgrade to Windows 10 is only free for a year. It's interesting. Microsoft really wants you on Win 10. They want Windows 8 to become that other Vista, It's, they want Windows 8 to be on Windows Voldemort, the Windows that is not spoken of, right? So, now, of course, this does not apply for those of you on enterprise agreements. For an enterprise agreement, you're going to get it free anyway because presumably your salesperson has sold you many years of that was great when they came out with this whole upgrade kind of stuff. It had this mildly mafia feel to it, So a nice operating system you purchased. It would be a terrible shame if something was to happen to it, If you were to pay me some more money, I could make sure that the upgrades would be happening. You know what I'm saying? So that's option one. Don't do anything. Look, Windows 7 is good stuff. Server 2012 is good stuff. If you're still on 08 R2, cool, but get to 2012 R2 as soon as you can, because that's really good stuff. Maybe you do an Office 365. Here's the question. Is your company still making money? Is it still working? Has IT kept you from existing? You know? It's not a rush. Just remember that. Option 2, just keep doing what you're doing. Adopt Windows 10 if you like. And if we're talking about desktops, group policies work as wonderfully as they ever did. If you're with me on Tuesday morning, I bemoaned the fact that it seems to me that we are seeing the last days of group policy. By the last days, I mean somewhere between 2030, now in 2030, it'll going. But it's a shame to de-emphasizing it, because I love the idea of the literally thousands of things I can control with group policy. And when I compare it to MDM solutions, how many of you rolled out an MDM solution, AirWatch or something like that? I mean, don't you look at it and say, is this it? I mean, pretty much, what do you get? You can't browse here, and you have to use that browser, and we've automatically put the Yelp app on for you. Oh, that's pretty exciting. Oh, also, we have the ability to wipe your phone when you're not looking, so all that stuff still works. If your system, many of you raised your hands and said you're System Center people. You're going to be a little sad, because Config Manager lets you do stuff with tablets or phones and things like that, but it's not a lot of things. So just bear that in mind. All right, let's talk about identity in Windows 10. You always had a lot of choices in where to store yourself. Windows 10 adds one to the mix. Okay? Option 1, local accounts. That's the easy one. The enabling technology is going to be probably MSAs, Microsoft accounts, and for those who haven't heard this acronym a million times, that's your Hotmail account, your Live account, your Outlook.com account. So it gives you an identity that's recognized by your computer and many web locations. So, I mean, in a sense, is that your Hotmail account, once you've logged into it, Microsoft has a large number of properties, and you log on to any one of those and say, keep me logged in, and you're pretty much there. I mean, because if you were with the talk that I did with Mark yesterday, anybody go to the one I did with Mark yesterday? Okay. One of the things I talked about is that, Active Directory was a cool thing, because we had NT for a few years, Active Directory comes out, everybody rolls it out by about 2003, and at that point it becomes as close as we get to single sign-on in the intranet. I know we never get there because there's so many applications that, but it's a whole heck of a lot easier. By 2004, it was a whole heck of a lot easier navigating your line of business apps than it was in 1998. Am I right about that? Okay, but now unfortunately we're not doing that stuff. Everything's going to be on the web. What's single sign-on for the web? It's, hint, not Facebook. Okay? So what do we do? If Microsoft is smart, then they're going to try to create an identity solution that essentially becomes, for the web, what Active Directory is for the intranet. And of course, everybody wants to do that. They're not the only ones doing it. But what has Microsoft got that's going to give them leverage? Well, they own the operating system, right? And they own Active Directory. And we're used to the idea of Active Directory. So by calling it Azure Active Directory, even though it does not resemble Active Directory at all, I mean, it is close to Active Directory as a roller skate is to a Rolls Royce. But the names sound kind of the same. And so we said, let's do that, absolutely. And honestly, if you want to look at a place where things are going to change very, very rapidly, watch Azure Active Directory. I mean, if you're client folks, you might not worry about it. With the server folks, definitely keep an eye on it. In the last few years, Microsoft has set it up so that you can register a machine. Why are they registering machines? They're registering machines because Microsoft knows that you need some sort of form of multi-factor authentication. But we're not going to go get RSA dongles. You might. There's nothing wrong with it. I'm not picking an RSA. For years, what was the multi-factor authentication Microsoft was pushing at enterprises? Smart cards, exactly. How many of you have smart cards in your organization? Yeah, it's just, they're a pain in the ass. They're a pain in the ass for two reasons. One, there's the smart card infrastructure. You got to go get laptops that have smart card readers. What's the other one? What's the really big one? Once you decide to do smart cards, then you have to live under the iron fist of PKI. Anybody here ever set up a certificate authority? Was that about the most fun you could have with your clothes on? How many of you set the age of the certificate to be 100 years so that you knew you'd be dead before you had to read? Uh-huh. And where do you keep that offline route? Offline route? Yeah, the offline route. How many of you have a machine under somebody's desk that's not plugged in most of the time, and that's the offline route? And nobody's admitting to it, cowards. It's a virtual machine, and we hope that the hypervisor will still exist, that it's on when we need it again. So, we start to get some of the goodies. Roaming settings, not a tremendous amount of stuff. When Windows 8 comes around, all of a sudden we can roam store apps with our account. And that's kind of nice. Again, I don't think anybody in this room cares about store apps, about Metro apps. But Microsoft's heart is in the right place. And if you look at the structure of modern apps, there's some very, very nice things. The sandbox, I know. We've all heard there are sandboxed environments, so no one could possibly write malware there. Yeah, talk to me about Java. Or any sandbox for that matter. If I were a Blue Badge, if I were a Microsoft person, I could say, no one has ever hacked the Microsoft Store sandbox. That's because no one uses it. Okay? But it's still a good try. And one of the things I like best, I mentioned this in passing on Tuesday morning if you're with me, is that the modern apps are packaged. They have a standard package format. We like that. You know, the days of click next, 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 next to install that stuff. I mean, how many of you still have applications that are difficult to deploy on a standalone basis? All of you do. Isn't that fun doing the setup wizard where you get into like the hypnosis, okay. You just say okay till it stops talking, right? I call that a spouse mode install. But I want to point out two things. One, spouse is a gender neutral term. Okay? And two is I'm not married anymore. So the beauty of a uniform package structure is that we can start doing the cool stuff that the Linux guys have had for the last almost 20 years. How many of you do Linux administration? Anybody? Okay. How hard is it to roll out a new application? You copy some files. They don't have a registry. They have a directory spelled etc, which if you're hip and with it in the Unix world, you pronounce Etsy. Many Unix creators do not have English as their first language. That's what I take from that. And that's the equivalent of it's really just as simple as that. So the fact that modern apps have a package is great. And the package, when you pick it apart, is really cool. There is an XML file that points to a bunch of digital signatures. Because if this is the modern app, they break up every 64K chunk and they hash it. Which means every time you start up a modern app, it's sniffing it to see whether or not it's been compromised or just corrupted. And if it does it have to download the whole 57 megs? Absolutely not. It just goes and gets the bad 64K. Does that make sense? So there are many good things about modern apps, and I believe that in time, they will become relevant. I do as well. Is there MDM? I'm pointing out the things that you want now. Because we're all dealing with the bring your own disaster stuff, where you've got an iPad, you've got a Galaxy phone or something like that, and you've got to be able to let people get to it. You're never going to have group policies for it, but you need some minimum stuff. Okay? So minimum MDM is we at least say you have to have a password. Your password's got to be at least a certain number of characters. You've got to have a lock screen after so many minutes of inactivity. That's the kind of stuff. That's the kind of MDM I'm talking about. And it works on a wide variety of devices. This is not a bad answer, and the cost is zero. But that's not really true, is it? MSAs are hard for you to manage. If you were to manage 10,000 users with their own Hotmail accounts, I'd be updating my resume, you know? So it's fine for homes or very, very small organizations. Option two, this is the one most of us have, is AD joined. You know this one, so I'll do this quickly. What's the good thing about it? It's got really good security and management tools. We've got app roaming via group policies, and I don't know. How many of you regularly use applications built as MSIs? Yeah, it was a great idea. It really didn't go anywhere, unfortunately. Desktop roaming, okay, this is not really an honest slide, is this? How many of you do roaming profiles? Yeah, I stopped doing it when my assistant would not stop leaving the EXEs downloaded to update Norton Antivirus on the desktop. Because the EXE is like monstrous. She had like a gigabyte on her desktop. And she said, why is it that it takes 25 minutes for me to log off? And I said, I know how to fix that. I'll put the servers up high so the data goes downhill. And that's... So. And what can we do? I mean, is there an answer? Sure. User training. User training. Because she worked for a trainer, she didn't get any training, so... Shoemaker's kids, not her fault. And a huge software library. What's the cost of the AD infrastructure in CALs? It's of no use on phones. The problem is it's of no value on almost any of those devices. That it's great for laptops and everything. Something I've always found very strange is you can only join one domain. Only join one domain. And that's all the same. And that's not going to change because if you were with me on Tuesday, I said that I saw this wonderful presentation by one of the Microsoft folks who were showing us CloudJoin. And she said, in passing, she said, now, if we had another machine that was joined to a legacy AD domain, I said, legacy AD domain? Legacy? You mean what I do for a living is going away? So, how many of you heard about CloudJoin this week? What? Oh, that's it. I thought it'd be every hand. Okay, so this is an important one. It's an important option. Your ingredients are going to be AAD. I wish that they had made it ADD. That would be more fun. They have a lot of problems with acronyms in the Active Directory world. Because first there's Active Directory, and then, excuse me, there was Atom. Anybody remember Atom? Active Directory for application... Mode? Okay, that sounds good. Yep. So, first there was Atom, and then it became ADLDS, Active Directory Lightweight Directory Services, which I immediately said, so that's the Mormon AD. Which makes sense, because it started with Atom. AAD is actually, Azure Active Directory is essentially Atom. They are very, very, very close. It is a more lightweight directory service. And why? Because what's the number one thing that Active Directory has that we really want that Azure Active Directory does not have? Group policies. Am I right? Yeah. You can understand why, though. I mean, in Microsoft's defense, why are they not doing group policies pretty much from this point on?
Because they hate us.
It's not because they hate you. It's because we're moving to a world, I said this Tuesday, I'll say it briefly again. We're moving to a world where Microsoft might own the cloud. But most of the devices on the cloud will not be Microsoft devices. Seriously, how many of you have a tablet, but it's not an iPad? That's not a big number. I mean, and it's a Microsoft show. How many of you have a Windows phone? Crickets. Oh, my people. And again, you're not going to end up, you and I will be buying laptops until we're dead because we're information workers and we need keyboards and stuff like that. But the folks that are largely consumers of the content on the internet, what are they going to do? They're going to get a tablet of some kind. And I'm not dissing the Surface. I like the Surface. If they came out with a 16 gigabyte RAM version of the Surface, then I might have one. Is there a way to put 16 gigs on this, sir?
So, Mark, one of the things that keeps coming out, like,
Please.
last couple of years, is the tablet market is actually decreasing, I think, as people get tablets and find they're not as useful as laptops.
Okay, so because we're being recorded, I'm going to try to remember to repeat the questions. And you said that your perception is, or you've read, that...
Read that even like Apple, the last 2 years, tablets are going down because people are finding them not as useful for actually doing real work.
No, I heard you the first time. I was just trying to say it out loud so it goes in the recording. So what the speaker said was, what the questioner said was that the world is leaving tablets, and I'm going to say because the smartphones are becoming more awesome and huger. I mean, you can't tell me that an iPhone 6 is not a tablet. It's not one you can swallow, I do remember seeing a CNET article about 2 years ago about how some company was developing a solar-powered tablet. And for some reason in my head, I'm thinking aspirin. And I was like, what? Solar-powered? Okay. So group policies wouldn't make sense. Apple is never going to give Microsoft control of the iPad. That would be entertaining. You know, they might get away with it with Android because it's open source stuff, but they'd have to have their own version of Android, which would mean that Verizon wouldn't support it if you put it on your phone, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So what does it give us? If you do Cloud Join, I will be totally honest with you. The list of reasons to do Cloud Join is relatively short right now, but it's going to get longer. And we've already seen it get longer, because the first time I saw this was 9 months ago, and the list has already gotten longer. So the first thing you get is you're directly connected to your cloud identity. And Microsoft is doing a lot of things to make you want an Azure Active Directory identity. There is a doodad they call the gallery, where if you have an Azure Active Directory, you can just browse this gallery, and for nothing, you click on these tiles for like Amazon Web Services. You punch in your Amazon Web Services password, and you never have to think about it again. Gmail, you name it. You could build your own if you're a coder. So the single sign-on to the web, it's just in its infancy, but it's getting there. It also will wake up MDM, any of the third-party ones, AirWatch, Mobile Iron, all those guys, or Intune, of course. How many of you are using Intune? Yeah, not a lot of hands. I'm with you guys. I like the idea of a cloud-based service. I don't like the idea of paying $72 a year for the privilege of having a phone. I think the price is a little high, but you know, I could easily be wrong. And it provides an identity for store apps. So here's one of the big changes in Windows 10. In Windows 10, excuse me, when you need an account to log on to in order to get to store apps, it doesn't have to be an MSA anymore. It can now be an AAD account, which is good because now, I mean, look, what do you and I want to do? I want Windows 10 to let me log onto my legacy Active Directory on premises and then somehow figure its way into the cloud so that I then get my apps. That's not going to happen. So instead we have Azure AD, and by the way, how would you manage that? I realize many of you do client stuff for a living, you don't do identity, forgive me if I'm boring you. But the idea is, there's several things you do. One is you can have an Azure AD, and you have a corresponding Azure account, so the cloud account for your on-premises account. And you have something to synchronize it. Is anyone doing this yet? A few of you, okay. The two big ways to do it, the old names, are DirSync. DirSync is a tool that runs like once a night, and it says, oh, we got a new Active Directory account, I'll create a corresponding one in Azure Active Directory. It also does things like if I change my password on premises, it changes the password in the cloud. That make sense? Okay. It's actually going away. The new name it's replaced with something called the Azure Active Directory Connect. What's that? AD Connect? AAD Connect. Connect. Right? It's not add. So that's one answer. The other answer is something called ADFS, Active Directory Federation Services. This was created at the behest of Bill Gates. The last thing Bill Gates ever told programmers in the Microsoft world to do was he said, you know, I've got this SharePoint thing that we use for collaboration with our partners like HP and whoever else, Dell. And the problem is that when I log on with my Microsoft account here on campus, if I get connected to the SharePoint that's over on HP, I have to log on again. That's annoying. Fix that. So they fixed that by gluing together a bunch of standards that made sense at the time, and Active Directory Federation Services is a way whereby you could take more than one forest and have them talk to each other. That's called a federation. Feels more like a Klingon, though, because they're not much fun to set up, okay? ADFS is anybody here ever set up an ADFS? Okay. Was that about the biggest pain in the ass? That made PKI look easy, right? Because part of what you have to do with ADFS is you've got to build your own certificate infrastructure. And here's an interesting thing about ADFS. If you decide that you want, because I mean, why would someone do this? The reason you would think about doing this is you have a lot of mobile workers. How many of you work for companies where a significant percentage of people never come to the office? Okay, great. Domain joining them is a pain in the neck. Dealing with user account, pain in the neck. So the beauty of having a parallel Active Directory on premises and in the cloud is that if for some reason you can't connect, VPN's a pain in the neck, you're connecting to Azure AD. This making sense? This is important, guys. This is what Microsoft wants to do, and you're going to be hearing a lot of this in the next 20 years. Making sense so far? Everybody right? ADFS essentially says, you're going to try to log on, but if you're logging on premises, maybe I will redirect you to the cloud or vice versa. You want to hear a weird thing about that? The people at home, they're logging onto Azure Active Directory. At that point, they can get to stuff. They can get stuff back on the on-premises and things in the cloud. Making sense so far? Now, what if we have just parallel accounts with DirSync? Works the same way. Almost. DirSync syncs up your on-premise and your cloud daily or however often you want it to. ADFS doesn't do that, because what does ADFS do? It makes real-time connections, trust connections between the two forests. Making sense? I am going somewhere here. What happens if your ADFS server goes down? No one can log in. So if you lose your on-prem, the guys at home can still connect in a DirSync plan. If you're using ADFS, that thing goes down, you're in trouble. What does that mean? You never build an ADFS server. You build many ADFS servers, which is, again, a fair amount of a pain. Now, how do we get our Azure Active Directory? If you were here for the question and answer that we did 2 rooms over, Mike, I'm actually wrong on this thing. Michael Nihas corrected me. You can get an Azure Active Directory account for free. I was saying that the basic was $1 a month per person. Premium was $4 a month per person. That was correct. But Michael said there's a free one. What I said at the time was that if you get Office 365, you get a free Active Directory. Michael said, that's true. He says, but anyone can sign up for an Azure subscription, which costs nothing, and you can have a free one. A free Azure Active Directory subscription is limited by, you can only have 500,000 objects in your directory. So Exxon, too bad for you. You're going to have to pay. Okay. And we could talk about a world where there's no on-prem required, which, for all of us that are a little shiny on top or white on top, seems odd, but when you stop and think about it, it's more and more the way the world's working. Which is an odd thing, because you know the funny part about it? The funny part about it is that if Office 365 is all about collaboration, think about it. What if you got a bunch of companies that are with 5 people? And we're doing that kind of, millennial thing, where we just put projects together, teams together for 3 hours to get something done, and then disband them. Well, if they're in different Office 365 domains, don't you think that I should be able to build a trust relationship between my Office 365 domain and theirs? You can't, which is insane. But anyway, so questions on this? Anybody? All right. Now, I told you I was going to do a demo. I'm scared. So, this is a piece of Windows 10 that changes radically with every version of Windows 10. What Microsoft is trying to do is they're trying to create a setup that is very clear. They want to be very clear and very simple and very obvious. They haven't achieved that goal yet. But I left this text up here. After you sign into your work or school account, we'll enroll this device with your organization. When the device is enrolled, your organization might collect information and might do other stuff. Every organization handles these things differently, so talk to your support staff to learn more. Thanks, Microsoft. Have more people call me. I appreciate that. How many of you have a mirror on your servers? You've pasted a mirror on your servers. Anybody done that? Really, when the error message says see your administrator, how do you do it? Okay, this is new text, and I'm not sure who wrote this, but important. If you plan to join your PC to your work domain, I think he means a legacy domain. Select Continue and choose the link to set up Windows with a local account instead. Let me get this straight. So I want to join the domain, so I have to remember to click Continue, and it's going to say work with a local account. I say, no, I'm getting on a domain. I don't need a local account. Oh, that's right, I got to remember. And there's no little note to say, in case you didn't read the last page. If you choose to enroll with your work account now, instead of creating a local account, do not attempt to join your PC to the domain later. If you do, you won't be able to sign into your PC. Maybe 8.1 is not a bad answer. So, wow, that was fast. Let's check something first. Can I get... Oh, those rats. You used to be able to do like Alt F10, Shift F10 to get a command prompt. I just want to see if I have connectivity. We'll see. Okay, so I'm going to log on with my cloud identity. When I was a kid, I had a weird last name. But then DNS came around, and I'm really happy I have a weird last name, because I could actually register Minasi.com. I have discovered over the years, though, that there are a lot of Minasis around the world, and they all hate me. So. And I plan to set up a perpetual trust, so that when I'm dead, it'll still be my domain. www.minasi.com with my headstone. Mark Minasi, writer of many books, gone and forgotten. All right, I got to make sure I did this right. One of the things that I really like about Windows 8 is a feature that I've wanted for a long time. I've always wanted like a group policy that would say, listen, I'm the only one in the room, so let me see what I typed, okay, when it comes to passwords. So you know that little I that you can click, you can see what you typed? Why does it show up in about 40% of the dialog boxes that Microsoft writes, as opposed to all of them? But anyway. So. All right, what account should I use? Sign in here. The screen went black. That's never good. Also, we have to reshoot all of our pictures because we just get a circle. We don't get a rectangle anymore. Okay, well, let's just leave that for a minute and let's look at some of the PowerPoints. And maybe when we come back, it'll all be good. I want to talk about applying apps to devices. I'll give it like 2 minutes because the first login always takes a while. And actually, once I log in, it's going to do that hi thing, you know. We're just setting up your store apps now. I don't have any. We're setting them up anyway. I'm really curious. Oh, you can get new apps from the store. I don't want any. Look at the colors, though. Sometimes it feels like Windows 8 is the play school version of color scheme for Windows. Come on, installing my apps. All right, well, we'll leave that for a little while. What's the most suspenseful part about firing up Windows 10 for the first time?
You don't know what you're going to get.
Are you going to get the green thing with the water, or are you going to get the icy, snowy mountain? I never know, but I'm always waiting to find out. So, all right. So we're going to get store apps. I want to talk to you about store apps. I know you're not using store apps, so forgive me, but this is one of the big things in Windows 10. A, and B, as I said to you before, desktop apps are going with it. That's why we're going through this. I'm going to have to I'll drag you through a lot of detail here, and I'm going to do it for a very simple reason. It's really not well explained in the blogs. Because, you know, again, Microsoft's doing this stuff very quickly, and they're just not having the time to document it as quickly as would be nice. So, it's 3 years from now. You're a Windows 10 shop. You started to create line of business applications that are modern apps, or maybe you like some modern apps, because personally, I'm a huge fan of Angry Birds. So somehow we're going to roll these things out. How's that going to work? So the simplest approach is just use the store. Has everybody seen the Windows 8 store, I hope? Has everybody seen the Windows 8 store? It's the store app. It comes with Windows 8, Windows 8.1, and it has categories. Food and dining, entertainment, games, productivity, stuff like that. That doesn't change in Windows 8, but it does get better. So what does it do? It lets you get any application in the Windows Store onto a compatible device. Might be a phone. Remember Joe Belfiore on Monday morning showed you the universal apps? Those are pretty cool. That's the good news. The bad news is I've worked with the new Outlook, and it takes some getting used to. But I think once we've used it for a while, we will come to love it, one hopes, right? Remembers those apps and settings, and then roams into your device. So this is nothing new there. If you have a line of business app, that's LOB, line of business, that's just the acronym that means homegrown application, something you built for your organization. How do you roll that out to your users? First way you do it is you can stick it in the Microsoft Store as if it were Angry Birds. Good news is people can now download it. Bad news is the rest of the world sees your line of business apps, which, by the way, may or may not be a terrible thing. Alternatively, if you have that line of business app and you want to install the thing, you can install it directly. Not using the store, by the way. This is not using the store. It's called side loading. Anybody look at side loading when Windows 8 first came out? Boy, was it a nightmare. You needed a certificate, and you had to say, pretty please, Microsoft, and some other, and pay them big, big money. Microsoft noticed that no one was using Windows 8, and they thought that might be a friction point. So it's gotten easier now. You don't need any licenses. Everything's pretty much set. I'm not 100% sure about it. It may be that the home version of Windows, you still can't do side loading. I'm not certain about that. But for Pro and for Enterprise, side loading costs nothing. You actually deploy the line of business apps with add-appx package, and I got to tell you, there's nothing easier than this. You just have that appx file. You say add-appx package, the name of the file, and in a trice. You didn't think you'd hear the word trice when you got up this morning, did you? You've got the app. This is because you're going in through your MSA. We're going to need credit cards, and you have very little that you can do with it. You can't control it. So, step one: use the Windows Store basically the way that we've been using it ever since Windows 8 came out. Make sense so far? Questions on this, anybody? I have to get a working Windows 10 box before I can demo that. So let's just go back to my demo and see if it worked. I think it was getting my apps. I'm guessing that all of you are on your smartphones taking my bandwidth away. Is that what's going on? So, the reason that I've been scared witless to do demos is that the worst place, because it's all this cloud stuff, which means I need internet. Now, TechEd has never been good for internet connectivity. Every single TechEd, like clockwork. 15 minutes into the keynote, no one can get on the internet. Because 23,000 geeks, who knew they were going to get on the internet? Who knew? So, almost ready. Okay.
Tether to your phone.
What was that?
Tether to your phone.
I actually, well, the problem is that I made the same mistake that every speaker who's stupid enough to do a cloud demo does, is I tested it when there was no one in the room, and it was really good. No, I even brought my hotspot, but it was just so that, did anyone go to the Orlando TechEd a 3 years ago? Yeah. That was when Azure first came out, and the first day there was like 500 sessions about Azure, and Orlando lost the internet. No, I'm serious. The entire city lost. It's like it's one of those moments when you know the universe is actually aware of you, and it's just screwing with you a little bit, you know? No, seriously, I did not do any Azure talks, but I have some friends who do this, and these poor people were in tears. They're like, I had the best demo. I'm like, did you do a Camtasia thing? They said, I did, Orlando, they've got internet. Not anymore. I have built 1 million Windows 10 boxes. It never takes this long. This is why I don't do demos. Okay, I will show you the Windows Store as soon as I have Windows. So. Option 2, Business Store Portal. This is a thing. I can demonstrate this. I'm going to say, let's do this. You say Business Store, store.microsoft.com. Please don't do this. Let's see if I have bandwidth here. And look, there's the business store. Doesn't it look pretty? It's got a little light bulb and stuff. And you'll notice that I haven't even logged on and it's already done the, so. We're sorry, we had trouble signing you in. Well, maybe if I do an incognito, I can sneak in there. Ha-ha! I'm going to sign in with my work or store account. Oops. Okay. Notice once again, we don't have the little I. That's because I should have a pin, I suppose, by now. Ready? I'm one of the first people to see the business store. Ready? It doesn't work yet, in case you hadn't noticed. But I just thought, very few people have seen this, the business store this far. That is exactly the demo I was trying to do. I was seeking demo failure, and I succeeded. All right, you go away. I should have set this up with like multiple screens just so we could have one going over here just for the entertainment value. Friends, this is why I don't do demos in my presentations. Okay, so here's the nice thing about this. So we know the current behavior. The model is that you go to the Windows Store, like I talked about in the last slide. Here's how things change. You can go to businessstore.microsoft.com once they get it up and running. And what you can do, again, cost is nothing. If you're a small organization, or you just don't want to spend a lot of money for System Center, you can do this. You log on with an administrative account in Azure Active Directory. Administrator account, Azure, right, so cost is nothing. Ingredients, Azure AD accounts. So your users need Azure AD accounts so they can log in. You need an admin account so you can mess with the store. So you log into the BSP, and if you do, the Business Software Portal, still Business Store Portal. I'm sorry, everyone says that wrong. Business Store Portal. If you log on with an MSA, you can still get accounts, but now the store understands that you've got personal accounts and corporate accounts. Personal apps and corporate apps. So for example, I have a Microsoft Surface 5 Pro, and I start to work for, I don't know, somebody. I have my apps on there that I've gotten on there using my MSA, my Hotmail account. The boss says, you need these 5 line of business apps. I have to log on not with my Microsoft account anymore, but instead with my Azure Active Directory account. And then what happens when they kill my Azure Active Directory account? First of all, I can't get to those apps anymore. And more importantly, what can I get to? The data associated with them. Because when you're doing this stuff, when the data is stored, you don't know this, but it's encrypted. And so when you leave the organization, all we got to do is what? Wipe the key. which is sitting in your TPM. Making sense? Basically, what you're going to do is you're going to say to your users, go to the Windows Store. But because they're logging on with one of your accounts, the Windows Store is going to say, oh, look, featured game. Oh, no games. No. Where's my Perry? Won't show up, okay? So we can block categories. You create a category for the organization. We say, we're the organization, bigfirm.com. So it'll be food and dining, entertainment, productivity, bigfirm.com. You can also then say, okay, there's some app that we love. And the example Microsoft uses all the time is Evernote, which I find interesting because they have OneNote. But I'm sure there's a reason for that. And so the notion would be they go in and say, okay, well, I'm going to buy 75 copies of Evernote or Angry Birds or whatever. Making sense so far? Here's where it changes from Windows 8. With Windows 8, first of all, you couldn't do that. There was no way to say, I want to buy 70 copies for my folks. So that's the first thing that's different. Second thing that's different is you now get 70 licenses. There's a system that keeps track of that stuff. Third thing, it will then let you download the actual package. If you install Angry Birds now, you don't get to see the AppX. It gets installed on your system. You can't pick that off your system and deploy it to someone else. In Windows 8, that's the case. Making sense? In Windows 10, you download the AppX. You can then do stuff with it. You could use Config Manager to deploy it. Or you don't even download the AppX. Just leave it. There's a slider. So here's your options. I bought 70 copies. If I flip the slider one way, it's going to want to know what people get it. And at some point in the next day, the store will automatically deploy those 70 copies to those 70 people. That's one option. Second option, 70 licenses. When those users next log on and they go to the store, what do they see? They see, oh, in bigfirm.com, we've got Evernote. What happens if 71 people download it? Well, the 71st person is not going to get it. Because what happens is the first time the app starts up, what does it do? It goes out and it sniffs for a license. And it does this every time it starts. What does that mean we can do? Not only deploy, but undeploy apps fairly quickly. How quickly is fairly quickly? About 24 hours. The store updates itself. It's going to take the system about a day to figure it out. Does it make sense? I know you hate Metro apps and you don't care. But think about the PowerShell packager that we talked about on Tuesday morning. And this same kind of functionality is coming for that. So look at this as a preview for the thing that's going to allow you to deploy Word or Flash or Adobe Reader or whatever. So this is the first step towards making your life easier. Is that making sense? Okay, good. Any questions? You guys are really quiet. Do you hate this? Okay. What's that? No, if I'm going too slow, I can talk faster. Really, seriously. Ask my friends. So. That's the way you bring it up. You bang your head on the table. Okay. Let's take this baby out for a drive. Okay. Cortana on Windows just doesn't make sense to me. It just really doesn't. I mean, I like Cortana on my phone. You know why? Two of you have a Windows phone, so you don't know this. The rest of you don't know this. In settings on the Windows phone, it's like this list, randomly arranged. It's not alphabetical. So if I'm looking to update my phone, it's like, was it update my phone or phone my update? And of course, there's no search. That's the only thing I use Cortana for is turn on quiet hours. That's the only thing Cortana does for me is it helps me avoid control panel. Which, maybe, huh? I take it back. Maybe Cortana for Windows 10 is a good idea. Let's see the store. Come on. There's another thing, too. If you're going to play with the Windows 10 beta, make sure you have a 4-core system and 64 gigs of RAM. Because, sorry, it's not that bad, but it's a little pokey. It's just a little pokey. Well, I've pressed the Windows key. Let's go talk for 15 minutes, and then I'll come back and see. It's been impressive so far, hasn't it? So, here's the cool thing. The cool thing is you can now build a custom store and pre-purchase stuff, and you don't have to use a credit card. You can use checks and POs and stuff like that. So those are all good things. What's the next step? Okay. So I'm sorry. It accepts payments besides credit cards. You can download the AppX package, as I said. You can deploy it offline. No Intune is needed. No config manager is needed. The only thing that's a little hinky is that if you have a line of business app that you want to use this to deploy, you have to put it in the store. By the way, it's not the end of the world. I mean, typically, what are we talking about? An in-house HR application. Do you think anybody's going to steal or care about your in-house HR application? Because they're not going to have an account. And even if they did, what would they do with it? Give themselves a vacation? They don't work for your company. What value would that be? Again, the interface is a browser. I think I said that before. You get to the store using the store app. Another thing that's new about Windows 10 is that the apps by default are updated automatically. So if you get a new AppX package, if the app is updated for some reason, these are typically fixing errors or things along those lines, they'll be updated automatically. You can change that. You can change that. But that's the default behavior. And again, given that modern apps are innocuous, this is not a bad thing. Any questions on this? Please.
Do those updates require admin rights?
So the question was, do those updates require admin rights? These are modern apps, and because modern apps have no juice, they're completely powerless, users can install their own modern apps. As a matter of fact, one of the ways you do deployment now in Windows 8, and I'll assume none of you do that because you don't do modern apps, is that if you go into the Windows Store, this is now in Windows 8 or 8.1, and you click on Angry Birds, you right-click it and get the URL, and there's a very long URL that points you to the place where you can download Angry Birds from the Angry Birds. That's called a deep link. You can actually stick that in an email. The problem with Windows 8, of course, is that you've got to have a credit card in order to be able to get the Angry Birds. Okay? Good question. Thank you. Did we get that then? Talked about that. Yes. Option 3, create enterprise store. Now, the way to do this has been Config Manager, because Config Manager has, again, how many of you do System Center out there? Fair enough. Wow. Cool. I may have to learn the System Center stuff if you're all going to start using it. I was hoping to retire before I had to learn Config Manager. It's the app that's with the ever-shortening name, because it used to be System Center Config Manager, which became SCCM, and Microsoft didn't like people calling it scum, which is what, and that's when Config Manager came out, right? The name's going to get shorter. Eventually it'll be Con Man. You've always been able, in Windows 8, you've always been able to build a store using Config Manager. That has put some people off, because they don't want to have to System Center. What they don't know is that at Codeplex, you can find a thing called Company Store. So there's an open source project that will let you build an in-house store. You still got to deal with the licensing and all that sort of stuff. The other way to deliver these things is through Intune. So if you have Intune, you can deploy apps, and you can even use an MDM. So if you have AirWatch or Mobile Iron or something like that, then you can, what you end up doing is that you, remember the deep links I was talking about? You essentially take those things and you register them into the MDM. And then the MDM will either deploy it directly for you, depending on how it works, or it'll present them as a store. Is that making sense? Any questions on that, anybody? Okay, good. You can deploy desktop apps as well, which is nice. Again, this is Config Manager. Something that is new that is not just config manager is business to business distribution. What does that mean? It means that I'm a big mining company, and there's some mining management software made by Mining Management Software Limited. And I can buy it directly from them. It's nice for a couple of reasons. First of all, if something goes into the store, what is the effect on its revenue? If I have an app that I'm charging $10 for, I charge $10 for. If someone buys it out of the store, what happens? Microsoft gets a chunk. What's a chunk?
I don't know.
30%. When you own the store. And when it's the only way to deliver, you know. And guess who they learned it from? Apple. Also, this is hilarious, but there's a vetting process. You can't get into the store if you don't follow certain rules. For example, someone built an app for an iPhone that if you drop it, it will measure how long it takes to hit the ground. I'm sorry. Apple wouldn't put it in the store. Which surprised me because they'd be selling a lot of iPhones. Anyway. And then there's the hilarious set of rules. So there can't be pornography. But there can be violence. I find it fascinating that American companies, and this is international, the American companies, those of you in Europe know that we love violence more than you guys do. And, well, no, I mean, it's true in the sense that, so basically, if I have a 13-year-old, this is the store saying that he can see heads being blown off, but breasts, my God, Correct me if I'm wrong. There's some cultures that wouldn't see it that way. So I've always found it fascinating that there isn't a separate process for every single country. And I've never seen anyone but me write a column about this, that it's kind of arrogant. So maybe I'm just missing something. So. All right. Let's just for chuckles see if... No, the start menu hasn't come up yet. Still working. Still working. So let's see, we talked about this one. This is the store. Again, the only thing that's new, those of you that are config manager people, is that here you're going to go to the business software portal, you're going to download the AppX files, as I said, and then you're going to set the AppXs out either as packages to be deployed, or you stick them in the company store. So, questions on this? In case it's not obvious, you can do all of the license management that you would expect to be able to do. You can control the automatic updates. I said automatic updates happen, not surprisingly, automatically. But you can change that. You can turn them off, or you can say, I say when they happen, or you can say they only happen at 3 in the morning, or things like that. Additionally, a lot of folks, particularly if they're doing config manager, they don't want you to see the Windows Store at all, which makes some sense. We just want to deploy the stuff that we want to deploy. If you shut off the Windows Store altogether, though, you don't get the updates. In Windows 10, there's the Windows Store executable, but there's also a service that runs in the background. It's Store SS or something, WSS Store, something along those lines. So it is possible to kill the store, but keep the store service running, which means you still get updates. That make sense? Okay. All right. Okay, we're done with the store. Stop boring us about the store, Mark. Sorry, it's my job. This is the new stuff. Other new stuff. Let's talk about controlling apps in Windows 10. Because we want to reduce friction getting to apps we want and block the ones we don't want. First one is Azure Remote Apps. Has anybody looked into that this week? What did you think? Did anybody play with the labs? How'd you like it? It has a lot of potential. You are a kind man. Are you single? There's ladies, there's a great guy here.
I think a lot will depend on the bandwidth.
A lot will depend on the bandwidth, absolutely. So anyway, what is it basically? How many of you do terminal service-y kind of things as part of what you do? Okay, you will know this. I want to make sure everybody understands this. Back in 2008, terminal services, isn't terminal services like one of the happiest parts of Windows? And when I say that, is it keeps getting better on a regular, it's a productivity tool that won't take no for an answer, you know? It's just, no, I'm serious. When it first came out in a special version of NT4, as I recall, you needed like a half a megabit per second to get a decent connection. By Service Pack 1, you probably want to answer that. By Service Pack 1 in Windows 2000, you were actually able to do a terminal services session at 14 kilobits. And I know this because I was stuck in a Philadelphia airport. There was something wrong with my domain controller, and I knew that if I could just flip a switch, I could fix it. And my cell phone gave me 14 kilobits, and I actually got the blasted thing done in about 3 minutes. And every single, if you look in the back of the newest version of Windows X, it's always, and oh, by the way, RDP is more efficient. So they're continuing to do that stuff, okay? Anyway, Server 2008 introduced the idea of the Terminal Services Gateway, which is useful for some, web interface into terminal services, but the big thing was remote apps. Now, how many of you use Citrix? Okay, Citrix people, stop giggling. I know Citrix had it beforehand. Let's just make believe Microsoft invented it, okay? Because they told me that it's like Citrix, but they built it from the ground up, and they would never lie. So the idea with remote apps, for those who haven't done it, is I want to deploy some app, and the standard deployment methods don't seem right. Or maybe I want to do it casually. I want to do it easily. So the notion is you have a terminal server, you have this application on the terminal server, and then you create this icon that points to a text file that will go out and start a terminal services session, run that particular app on a window. So it's not the whole desktop, it is just that application window, and it looks like it's running right on your system. Okay? Make sense? I know a lot of you knew that. I wanted you to know that. I want everybody on the same page. Azure remote apps. Well, you can probably guess by now what's happening. With Azure remote apps, you upload an application to Azure. That's the fun part, because when you're uploading things to Azure, then it can be very slow. But start it running when you go to bed, and it'll be done by the time you get up. And you got that up there, and then you go to the Azure portal, and in the Azure portal, there's a thing called remote apps. You can then register something. You then give somebody, again, an icon that will connect them up to Azure, and it's the same deal. So it's kind of what Terminal Services has done, but what's the benefit here? The benefit here is if you are a geographically dispersed company and you want people to be able to get this from anywhere on the planet, this could be kind of nice. So you build an Azure image with the app. So you need like a Windows 10 image. You log onto the portal, you deploy them as icons or as long paths. You can deploy it to users through Azure portal, and this part's a little wonky. I'm sure they're going to make it easier. Now, these are regular old apps. These are desktop apps, the type we have always known. It's not modern apps. Now, what does Windows 10 have to do with this, Mark? Well, first of all, we're talking about stuff in the Windows 10 timeframe, but Windows 10 has a special under-the-hood caching thingy that makes it more responsive. Once you get Windows 10 responding to you, then if you do an Azure remote app, try this at the lab. I don't know if the labs are still open, give this a shot. And it gives you the opportunity to try it on a Windows 8 system and a Windows 10 system, and you will see it's significantly faster. Has anybody done that, the 8 versus 10 thing in the lab? Okay. What was your experience? Did it work well?
3 times faster.
Sorry?
3 times faster.
3 times faster. There you go. You have better luck with Windows 10 than I do, sir, so perhaps you should be helping here better. All right, any questions on this? Okay. The pricing on it is reasonable, so it's definitely something you want to be looking at, I would say. Okay, so, the other reason that you do this, by the way, is where does the data go? Typically, the data on an Azure app is, of course, going to be written to some kind of Azure storage. So, your app's in the cloud at this point. So on the one hand, we want to roll out some kinds of applications simply. On the other hand, we want to get rid of some applications. And that's Device Guard. So Device Guard, you may have heard about this. And I think they talked a bit about it in the keynote. Chris Hallam, who does the talks about Windows security is a great speaker and a really, really, really smart guy. So if you have not seen his talks, I don't know if Chris is talking again today, but I mean, how many times this week has there been 7 sessions you wanted to see at the exact same time, right? And then at 3 o'clock, there's nothing I want to see. So you remember, all that stuff's on Channel 9, and you can all download them as files, and if you like, go back to your hotel room and download 12 hours of them, so when you're flying back to Sweden, then you can be very, very smart when you get off the plane. So, anyway, as we know, most IT pros' favorite malware deployment is a diseased USB stick. Okay, so, and Device Guard in Windows 10, I'm going to say slows that down. There's no such thing as stopping, but it's just Microsoft's putting some more bricks in the way between you and the bad guys. Device Guard. Who here has heard of App Locker? Software restriction policies. It's like that, but it works. So you have a list of approved executables. It's an XML file, which you then run an app to make it into a binary file. This is something that you see in Server 2016, and you're seeing it in Windows 10. Files that used to be XML files are being compiled into binary files. And you know why they're doing it? To get some extra speed. I don't know that it makes sense here. They're doing it in Hyper-V, because how many of you ever built a Hyper-V virtual machine? Okay. If you do, there's a text file. There's an XML file that says it's got this many NICs and it's got this much RAM and all that sort of thing. And the Microsoft guys claim that Hyper-V is significantly faster because they're no longer using the XML files. They're now using binary files. There's another file as well that holds onto the current state of the virtual machine. That used to be XML. That's becoming binary now as well. Does it matter? Aiden, have you tried it back and forth?
I don't have a host big enough to really.
You don't have. You really have to have a big Hyper-V farm for that to matter. Okay. Is what? Scalability. Well, okay. Well, So now, and typically what you're going to do is that you're going to say, I'm only running code that's been signed. And you can thus say, trust all software signed by Microsoft, or trust all software signed by Adobe or something like that. Now, in order to do this, but what about your line of business applications? Or what about your crappy applications that you've been using that you purchased 9 years ago, the company's not around anymore, and they're not going to sign it for you? How many of you ever set up a code signing PKI? Okay. Do you ever want to do it again? I mean, most folks do not. Microsoft knows that, and they built a nice tool. I can't remember its name. It's like Code Lock or something along those lines. Do I have the name of it? Yeah. Now, we've had some group policy settings like this before. Vista, who I know you hate, had a setting in UAC that would say only elevate signed applications, which in 2006 was goofy because nobody signed their applications. But I said at the time, people will soon be signing applications. So you can even be using that now. What that means is if someone wants to put malware on your system, they can do it, but they got to sign the app. Little used, but they could be bypassed. The big story here, has anyone heard about virtual secure mode this week? Okay, I wish it were everybody. This is really interesting. I only have a minute left. I really want to talk about this. A lot of attacks. Have you ever seen those DMA devices you just shove into the card slot and it unlocks your system and reads your password? What's happening is that it identifies itself in plug and play as a direct memory access device, which means it gets direct access to memory, and it starts reading your passwords. Now, the only operating system around that's protected from that is Windows 8.1. But the better answer is, let's stop worrying about it. What they actually have is a copy of Hyper-V in Windows 10 that runs a mini 1 gigabyte version of Windows that just, ever heard of LSAS, the local security authority subsystem? LSAS.dlo? That thing. It holds onto your passwords. It's not in Windows anymore. It's sitting in a separate virtual machine that is running under Hyper-V. Locked by stuff in your TPM. So, all kinds of secrets. Provides a virtual TPM for virtual machines as well. That's kind of cool. That means if you're spinning up a virtual Windows 10 box and you want to do stuff that involves a TPM, it will emulate one for you. Now, there's conflicting stuff here. It doesn't work yet. This is why I can't tell you about it, too much about it. It doesn't work yet, but there's one blog says it needs 2016's AD. I'm not certain about that. So. Anyway, so I wanted to do some of those walkthroughs. Was it helpful? Did it clear anything? Yes? No? All right, hey, listen, this is my last talk, and so can I just take a second and say, I only get to come here because you guys keep asking for me, and I can't tell you how grateful I am for this, because this is my favorite week of every year, which is sad, I know. Can I please ask you to do two things? One, we have a terrible evaluation rate. Mark and I talked to 2,300 people yesterday, and we've got 60 evaluations. The feedback's really important. If you haven't done your evals, pretty please think about doing it. It'll be up for several days. And the second thing is thank you, and remember to use this knowledge for good and not for evil. Bye-bye.